Ladies and gentlemen, another thing we learned over this weekend, and we know to be true in our lives, is that sometimes we have this expectation that when we encounter a less affiliated Jew, we have this expectation that after the encounter with us amazing frum people, that somehow the person's going to then take off their t-shirt and put on a bekisha, and somehow automatically become a frum ben Torah overnight. But life doesn't work that way. In our own backyard, we have a recent story that taught us just this very lesson. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to introduce to you Dovy Weiser.
Good Tavach, everybody. So I just heard the tail end of the tefillin sagas. And actually my story for right now opens with a little bit of a tefillin story as well. 2 years ago, we were on a trip, on a tour. And one evening we were having a kumsitz. And there was a non-Jewish tour group that was near us. And after a little while, we saw an older gentleman without a yarmulke, clearly not a frum Jew at least, walk over and sit with us, and a couple of people started to talk to him. And I joined the conversation, and after a few minutes, he shared that he grew up in Brooklyn, New York, went to Yeshiva Brooklyn, now he lives in California, and he hadn't put on tefillin since 1960-something, I don't recall. But it was clear he heard the Jewish music, and it called him, and so he came to sit with us. And I started talking to him, and I don't know why, I just said to him, well, and I don't remember his name, honestly. I said, we have Shacharis tomorrow morning at 8:30. Why don't you come join us and you can put on tefillin? He says, no, I can't. I said, that's no big deal. You guys are right next door anyhow. Come. He says, you don't understand. I can't. And he went on to proceed and explain to me his mother had passed away from a terrible sickness, his sister, and he had issues with Rebbeinu Shalom that he couldn't reconcile. But I don't want you to think I've forgotten everything he said, because I still give tzedakah, I still give charity, and I even send a check every year to my alma mater, to Yeshiva Brooklyn. I said, okay. And it just dawned on me that clearly tzedakah is important to him, and a little spark had been turned on by the music here tonight. So I said to him, you know, if you come put on tefillin tomorrow morning, I'll make a donation to your favorite charity. He said no. We spoke a little further, and let's just say that by the end of our conversation, there was a promise of a substantial donation for myself and somebody else to his favorite charity if he would join us to put on tefillin in the morning. And he took leave, and I left, went back to my room, and I called my friend Moshe Leib Gray, who's a Chabad Shliach in Dartmouth College. I said, Moshe, how do you guys do this? I see all the pictures, you make it look so easy. And he said to me, what happened? I told him, he says, don't worry. He said, if a Yid wants to do a mitzvah, to be mezaka another Yid with a mitzvah, there'll be siyata d'shmaya. And I got to tell you, I went to sleep, I was pumped, I was sure that guy's going to be in the morning, I was early to davening. Let's just say that he didn't show, and to say I was deflated would be an understatement. However, for the past 7 weeks, my thoughts about this story have totally changed. And I'm filled with hope that this Jew will find his way to putting on tefillin, maybe even to the group, who knows. And the seed that I planted 2 summers ago will perhaps take root and grow. You see, approximately 30 years ago, I went to buy a bottle of wine for Shabbos. And I walked into Topps Liquor on Avenue U between East 28th Street and East 29th Street. And I bought a bottle of wine. I think it was a little more than 30 years ago, and they carded me. And yeah, it was a little more than 30 years ago. And I didn't have proper ID. And they said, you can't buy it. I said, it's for Shabbos. Didn't care what it was for, you'd need ID. So I went out to the car, my father was in the car, he came in, and of course we struck up a small conversation. And then from then on, every time I walked into the store, you know, we were friends. And my friendship with the Cohn family, with Howie, whose uncle started the store in the 1940s, his wife, who passed away during COVID, his son Jeff, who's become a good friend of mine, and his wife Mary, They become my friends, and I sent him tons of customers over the years. He taught me a lot about wine. I taught him about whiskey. Nobody knew much about bourbon then, so it was just scotch. And they've been to our home for Shabbosim, for Shabbos meals. And one time I invited him for a sukkahs, for a lunch. And I was thinking, I have Lulav and Esrig, how can I get them to bench Lulav and Esrig? I don't want to be so obvious. They may look at it as weird. What is this thing? So I decided I'm going to leave the Lulav and Esrig on the table in the sukkah, and they'll come in. I say, I just got back from shul. Oh, this is Lulav and Esrig, and if they engage, we'll do something about it. And kachava, they come in, we make kiddush in the sukkah, and I pick up the Lulav and Esrig to walk out, and he says, what is that? And I tell him, what do you do with it? And I explain that we shake it, and his wife says, can I do it too? I said, for sure. And so I give her the Lulav and Esrig, and I make a bracha, she repeats after me, then he does it, and she says to me, what is the significance of this Lulav and Etrog? So I said, it's a very, very good question. Let's start the meal and we'll talk about it. I'm thinking to myself, how am I going to explain to a non-frum person who knows they're wonderful people, they're super Jews, but they don't know much about anything when it comes to practicing Yiddishkeit? How am I going to explain Kavonos, Lulav and Esrig, what it resembles? So we go in, we wash, we sit down at the table, and as soon as we sit down, I cut the challah, she says, so what's with the Lulav and the Etrog? I said, we're going to get there. And 3-4 times throughout the meal, she keeps on pushing, saying, no. And before I could even say anything, she turns to my son Yehuda, who was 8-9 years old at the time, and she says, Yehuda, do you know the significance of the Lulav and Esrog? He says, of course, my Rebbe told me, and in 30 seconds he spits out an answer. And she goes, oh, I get that, that's great. You know, sometimes you bring a person to your table, and you're so, you have trepidation about it. I have to make the right impression, I have to say all the right things, you write notes. And then sometimes you see that you don't have to have a cheshbon, the answer just comes out naturally. Well, excuse me, approximately 15 years ago, I was in my office, it was the end of the day, and my phone rings, and it's Jeff. It's, how are you? Good. So I need to talk to you. I said, okay. He goes, no, I really need to talk to you. I said, like in person? He says, yes. I said, do you need me to come to the store? He says, if you wouldn't mind. I said, okay. So it was towards the end of the day, I got in my car, and I drive into Brooklyn, and I get to the store about 7 o'clock at night. And I come in, and he calls me into the office in the back. He's sitting there with his wife, with his mother, with his father, and the air in the room was very, very heavy. And he goes and he pulls out a piece of paper, and the paper shows how basically somebody had said not to shop in his store because he wasn't Shomer Shabbos, and the store was open on Shabbos. Recently, there had been other stores that opened in the neighborhood from owned liquor stores. Today, we have a dime a dozen, but back then, 15 years ago, there weren't so many, and 20, 30 years ago, there certainly weren't. And he looks at me and goes, how can they do this to me? And I was quiet. He says, my uncle, my dad, we've been here for the community. When you needed to buy wine for Shabbos, this was the only store. Orlander's wasn't a Jewish store yet. Midwood on Coney Island Avenue wasn't here. We were the only ones. How could they say not to shop by me? I was quiet, and the Kadosh Baruch Hu put Siyata Dishmaya in my head. And I said, Jeff, imagine your suit is dirty, and you drive up to the cleaners, and there are 2 cleaners on the same block, and one of them has a pink ribbon in the window that money from the business goes to support cancer research, and one doesn't. And somebody in your family, unfortunately, has suffered through this. And so cancer is a cause that's near and dear to your heart. Given the choice, you're going to walk in and support the store. He says, of course, the store. I said, yes. I said, well, Jeff, you need to understand, Shabbos is our cause. It's the cause of the Jewish people. Nobody is not choosing you. We're just choosing to support our cause. He was quiet. He looks at me and he says, so what do I do? I said, I can't tell you what to do, but if you want to close on Shabbos. He says, how does one do that? And I said, well, really, you just pull the gate down. And he looked at me, he goes, well, I don't know if I'm ready, and we started to talk a little bit. I said to him, well, let me ask you a question. I said, what would be if your daughter Emma, I think she was 8 or 9 years old at the time, came home with a non-Jewish boy, and before I could even finish the sentence, him, his mother, all of them, God forbid. I said, well, let me ask you a question. Why shouldn't she? I mean, what does Judaism mean to you? What does it mean to her? What does she see that she should want to marry a Jew or at least stay away from marrying a non-Jew? And we had a very long conversation. I spent a little over 5 hours there that night. The next day was Erev Shabbos, being Makatzer here, and I bought them Shabbos candles. And that was it. And I go in there regularly. I've sent them over the years hundreds of customers. I tell everybody, go in, say hello, tell him you're my friend, talk to him, he's a Jew, reach out to him, love him, and that's it. Well, 7 weeks ago, I was in Eretz Yisrael. It was Friday afternoon, about an hour or so to Shabbos, and my phone rings, Jeff Cohn. I didn't answer it. And then I get a WhatsApp. It says, hey, buddy, call me when you can, all's good. So, WhatsApp, you push the button and you just connect it back. So that's what I did. And I pick up the phone. He says, hello, how are you? I said, great. I said, I'm in Israel. He goes, you're in Jerusalem? I said, yes, that's fantastic. I said, what's going on? He says, remember that conversation we had? This conversation was 15 years ago. I said, yes. He goes, I think it's time. I said, okay. I said, this week? He goes, no, I'm not ready yet. I said, what do you mean? He goes, I need to go talk to my accountant, to my lawyer. We have to talk it through. I said, Jeff, stop. He says, what? I said, it's clear for me, and there was his voice was shaking. And I said, it's clear to me you're doing this for the right reasons, and you're coming from the right place. Meet with whoever you need to meet with, but when you meet with them, let them know this is what you're doing. And he says, okay. And I said to him, well, if it's not for this week, he says, well, I need to know what to do. And I said, I'll be back in New York on Tuesday. We'll sit down and we'll work it all out. And when I hung up the phone, he wished me a good Shabbos. I wished him a good Shabbos. I called a friend of mine in New York and I said, listen, do me a favor, this conversation just happened. Please go over to the store, give him a hug, give him a little chizuk, and that's what he did. Well, that was 7 weeks ago. And the following Shabbos, back in New York, was my son Rafael's bar mitzvah. And that was the first Shabbos in 83 years that the store that had been a staple on Avenue U was open on Shabbos, was closed on Shabbos, excuse me.
It's been a long journey with my family. In 1941, my great uncle opened up a liquor store on Bedford Avenue and Avenue U. And flash forward 83 years later, my family is still here. I've always been proud of who I am. I've never protested to be something I'm not, but growing up in the store, I always imagined how my life would end up. And after what's going on in this world and thinking about everything, my wife and I and my father and children really want to have a better quality of life. So I picked up the phone and called one of my good customers and said, I think the time is right for what I want to do. And he goes, you're talking about closing on Shabbos, aren't you? And I said, yeah. I said, I think it's the right move. I just don't know exactly what to do. And he said, just do it. So we closed the store 5 weeks ago at 4:15 on Friday, closed on Saturday, and started what I believe is the best chapter of my life, which is to celebrate Shabbat. It's been an unbelievable experience for the last 5 weeks. I get to be with my family. My shoulders feel like they're below my knees, no pressure. I get to hang out with my daughter and just have an amazing time. What I did not expect was, or wasn't ready for what the community was going to do next, which was my phone didn't stop ringing. People didn't stop coming in my store. The gifts, the hugs, the kisses, the thumbs up, people telling me that they're proud of me and what I did. And the best way to sum it up is if I needed to have a football team, I'd have 2 million Jews on my team in 2 seconds. So although being a dad is the greatest thing I've ever done, and meeting my wife, this is way up there, because what it's brought us has been the most unbelievable path that we've had for the last 5 or 6 weeks. Just the way my store is flowing, the way the customers are coming in and talking to us and treating us. They'll ask me a question, and as they'll walk out, they'll turn around and go, you did a great job, we're so proud of you. I've witnessed customers laughing, crying. I'm like, why are you crying? They're like, because we're so happy for you. So, although I'm proud of who I am, never before have I ever been so proud to be a Jew like I am now. So I'm excited for this new journey. I'm excited to see where it takes us. but I just want to thank everyone for making us feel like we did the greatest thing ever. So we love you. Anytime people have questions or anything, come talk to me. But I'm just ecstatic, really. For a guy with a big mouth, I think I have no more words left to say.
You know, Jeff said it better than I can, but I just want to conclude by saying, first of all, for those in the room, if anybody has gone into the store to support him, thank you. If you haven't yet, we all have friends in the business, but let's show the love and make it go around. I never would have thought that I'd be watching this video or standing up here telling this story. At the time, it was just something that happened, and this was just somebody that I was friends with who happened to be a Jew. But you got to plant seeds, you got to reach out. You never know, sometimes they grow quickly, sometimes it takes a long time, but we see that they grow. I'll get the Vach. Thank you for listening.